Greetings from Tokyo, my dear friends. This is Daisuke, and I very much hope that this video finds you well and in very good spirits wherever you are in the world. And today, if you don't mind, I'd like to continue on with our discussions on 1970s disaster movies. And I'd like to focus our attention, if I may, on another very special, spectacular, suspenseful entertainment. This time it is a film from 1974. The director is Richard Lester, and it has another remarkable, splendid cast, included in which are, for example, Richard Harris, Omar Sharif, David Hemmings, Anthony Hopkins, Ian Holm, Clifton James, Shirley Knight, Roy Kinnear, Kenneth Cawley, Julian Glover, Kenneth Cope, Freddie Jones, Roshan Seth, and Simon McCorkindale, and others. This is a great film. It is one of my absolute favorites. It is this film, Juggernaut. The film Juggernaut is essentially about a passenger cruise ship with passenger and crew, and one day aboard one of its voyages, it is discovered that there are a number of explosive devices, a number of bombs that are strategically placed throughout the ship. And someone calling into the authorities, identifying himself as Juggernaut, claims to be responsible for these bombs and is threatening the destruction of the ship and the explosion of these devices unless a ransom that he is demanding is paid. And so we have already the setting of a very suspenseful situation. Added into that is a team of bomb disposal experts led by the character played by Richard Harris, and in particular the duo Richard Harris and David Hemmings, their characters, and their attempts at getting aboard this ship and trying to disarm the bombs before it is too late. Add into this the factor of stormy seas, a stormy weather that prevents evacuation of the ship of the passengers from the ship, thus creating the extra added sense of suspense and drama with these passengers who are aware of the situation, having to deal with the possibility that something might go off at any minute. And in the meantime, it is up to the crew and the passengers to remain as calm as possible while waiting the results of the efforts made by this bomb disposal unit. And also on the ground at the same time, there is this police procedural type of story going on with the attempts by the authorities to try to track down who is responsible for this particular crisis situation. This is the film Juggernaut. Now, full disclosure, I will say that if I were to make a list of my absolute favorite disaster films from the 1970s, this film Juggernaut is very high on that list. It's probably up there in the top 5, top 3. This is one of my absolute favorites of the genre. And I should say also that perhaps the discussion could happen whether or not this film indeed falls within the disaster genre to begin with. I would suggest that it does, because it does involve a type of human-made disaster and a type of hostage situation, the idea of bombs aboard a ship, is a potentially disastrous one, of course, and it is, of course, up to a certain set of characters to try to prevent such occurrence from indeed happening, while at the same time another set of characters trying to track down who exactly this juggernaut is. And so in that sense, I think there is this disaster feeling in the air, combined with which is the drama and the human drama that is afforded to us by the stories that we see represented by, say, the passengers and the crew, seeing their interactions, seeing how they handle the pressure, seeing the various relationships that existed prior to these events and then maybe that are forged during the stress of these particular events. And that adds to the component of these films, which is the human drama combined with the disaster element. And speaking of the human drama, we get a lot of I think, earnest portrayals. This has the feel of, there are some moments that might seem melodramatic, but it is always presented in a very, how shall I put it, a very serious tone. There is of course, expressions of relationship issues with certain characters here, certain characters there, and then when everything begins to reach these disaster, emergency situation elements, then we see how these relationships are further tested or further forged. And so it's an interesting element to see the human stories interact with the disaster element stories. And the performances are brilliant. And Omar Sharif portrays a very interesting character in terms of his command over the ship, his attempts at trying to take control of his situation, both professional and personal, and trying to deal with this overwhelming situation as best as he can. And then also the police officers and the authorities on the ground, and people trying to essentially deal with the situation, whether or not to negotiate with essentially a terrorist, and whether or not to go through with the ransom or try to implement some kind of other rescue operation. And we have this side of the equation represented by characters portrayed by, for example, Ian Holm and Anthony Hopkins, and their attempts at trying to track down who this person is that is behind this entire plot. And then, of course, we have the bomb disposal experts, Richard Harris and David Hemmings. And we should say that Richard Harris's performance here is electrifying. It is absolutely electrifying. The way that he delivers dialogue, the way that he seems very much almost nonchalant about his job, but we understand that indeed he is certainly under a lot of pressure, and he knows it, and he knows that his life could be lost at any given moment. And so there is this sense of danger in the air, but also a wittiness that Richard Harris brings to this performance. And his chemistry with David Hemmings' character is one of the great emotional anchors, if you will, of this film, I would suggest. And it's a real strength, and to see that develop and what eventually happens is truly, truly electrifying. The actual footage itself, the way the ship is shot, the way that the bomb elements are shot from outside and also from inside, we see the specifics of the mechanisms, which adds a certain, not certain, but a great deal of suspense. And we are with the people step by step in terms of how they are investigating the matter on the ground versus how they're investigating the matter on the ship. And we see the intricacies of the devices and what it is these people have to do step by step by step by step. One false move could lead to utter disaster. And we are constantly reminded of this, and the pressure and the tension in the air. Oh my goodness, what a brilliant film this is. It is suspenseful, it is witty, it is very sincere, it is very earnest, and it never loses sight of its various plot strands. Even when we follow different arcs along the way, everything is still very organized, very clear, and we understand the ultimate goal or ultimate purpose of each of these particular characters. It is wonderfully constructed. And I should say also that I understand too that this has a very interesting, perhaps somewhat troubled production in terms of other directors that would have been involved, but then did not become involved, and ultimately Richard Lester was asked to join, and he decided to be the director of this particular film. And so his participation, I think, is very, very key, also in terms of certain cast member choices. What I like here, too, is there is a sense also of a type of warmth, if you will, in some of the characterizations. I would direct one's attention in particular, for example, to, say, the Roy Kinnear character and how he interacts with various people and what his job is and what he tries to do given the very terrible situation that is being faced by everyone. And his relationship with the people, in particular, the character played by Shirley Knight, is such a surprising and such an effective one. And there is a genuine sense of warmth and caring, as well as the suspense and the darkness that we see in terms of the suspense and disaster elements. So I love this balance that is struck under the direction and in the hands of Richard Lester. And I should also point out that the writer and producer is credited as being Richard D. Coker, but I understand this is actually Richard Allen Simmons. And the executive producer is David Picker. The associate producer is Dennis O'Dell. This is, as I say, one of my absolute favorites in this genre. This is one of my absolute favorites, and for the reasons that I tried to suggest earlier, it is truly exciting. Richard Harris's main character, Fallon, is one of the greats in this particular genre. So heroic, so vulnerable, so funny, so charismatic, so cool, and yet he is under so much pressure, and he never gives up. Even when he's faced with these terrible choices, he never ever gives up. We follow him right to the very end, and it is quite a suspenseful journey. And it's not just him, of course. We have other great performances, other great performers. I should mention also, I mentioned Omar Sharif's wonderful portrayal as the head of the ship, and Shirley Knight and Roy Kinnear, what goes on there, what happens between Shirley Knight's character and Omar Sharif's character. Clifton James also gives a really nuanced and very grounded performance. And his character is very intelligent, very sharp, and I like how that is shown and portrayed by the filmmakers here. That's another example of why this film is so great. I love how this film is portraying characters that are thinking, that are really trying to work out situations, and that are very smart. This is a very smart film with characters that are also very smart, and I really, really admire that. And also I mentioned the ground game, as it were, Ian Holm and the type of pressures that he is under, and also Anthony Hopkins too. His attempts at trying to track down who this juggernaut is, and trying to go ask these various people and running into maybe dead ends and not necessarily leading anywhere, but then suddenly maybe there's a possibility here and there's a possibility there. And you add on to that the fact that his character is also very personally involved in what happens in the ship, as we know. And so we get this really charged, nuanced performance from Anthony Hopkins, and we see the dire situation that he is under, and yet he's trying to remain as cool and calm and collected as possible, because that is the only way he knows that he would be able to hopefully capture the culprit, whoever it is behind this particular situation. And everyone the performers who may have, say, roles that are somewhat limited in running time, they are just as effective as the more sort of roles that have a larger running times. In other words, each character portrayal here is completely on target, spot on the money, all the way to the very end. And what you are getting ultimately is a really suspenseful film, well presented, well told, and there are moments of humor, there are moments of tragedy and sadness, there are moments of suspense and shock and surprise, and all the way we are with these characters wanting to find out what will happen at the very end. This is one of the greats of this era. This is the film Juggernaut. Okay, my friends, so that's it for now. And so until we meet again, please be happy and healthy and well, and please keep on watching a lot of great, great, great movies. So until we meet again, thank you and cheers.